Hello, class. Um, just wanted to go over the UCR system and the NIBRS, the NIBRS and UCR system, plus the National Crime Victimization Survey. This is really important for us to understand in the to understand how we are painting that picture with statistics. And this is the UCR has been used since 1930, 1929. 18,000 law enforcement agencies publishes to this report, which is a summarized report called SRS, and it's annually produced. And I must mention 18,000 law enforcement agencies, but I think it's something like 90-something% of all law enforcement agencies do report to this system. So we get a pretty well-rounded picture on a summarized level. I'll come back to that summary. The National Crime Victimization Survey, NCVS, is actually a survey which people actually literally go into people's homes and ask families, not minors, but adults, crimes that have been committed other than murder and one or two other crimes. Yeah, so this is to get at from a different angle crime. FBI uses, the Bureau of Justice uses this both these sources. So both have their ups and downs as far as what they can do. So Part 1 offenses of the UCR, there's Part 1 and Part 2 offenses. One of the problems is that I'll always find in the UCR are these 7 offenses. Murder, rape. Date rape is, also with rape, sexual battery, robbery, assault, aggravated assault. So when we talk, there's a couple things that we'll come back to when we look at some of the deficiencies of this system. But we're dealing with, as far as violent crimes, a minimum set of crimes, but also property crimes. We're also talking about just a small group. Burglary, larceny, theft, motor vehicle theft, and arson. So we're really are not getting, with the complexity of crime today since the establishment of the system in 1929. The complexity of crime today and the nuances of it are left out. And Part 2 offenses, these are the least as far as criminal impact on the victim. This is more minimum. You have a vast array of crimes within the Part 2 offenses. The most prevalent crime that you find in Part 2 offenses are drug abuse, drug users, not drug sales, but drug abuse, and simple assault are the two. What's the difference between simple assault and aggravated assault, or Part 1 offense, which is assault? Simple assault, you send somebody to the hospital. Aggravated assault, you send somebody to the hospital. Simple assault, you don't seriously injure somebody, or at least that's how it's reported as. Another very prevalent Part 2 offense is DUIs. These are all what we call victimless crimes, social disorder crimes that are not all are victimless, but many of the Part 2 offenses are victimless. That is drug abuse, for example, but DUIs does have the impact of having a victim, and so does obviously assault has a victim. But like I said, there's dozens of Part 2 offenses, but those are the biggest hitters, I guess you could say. NIBRS. So we are in the process of, we're not just in the process, we've been in the process since 1988, transferring over from the UCR into the NIBRS. And it's been, states have done it voluntarily, or I would say agencies have done it individually. And it's not everybody has been on board, but this year it was the big, okay, everybody has to do this. And so what is the NIBRS system? This is a video from Oops. This is a video from the FBI itself, talking about, this was produced in 1988, so this was talking about what is happening as far as the move to NIBRS. And I'll play some of this.
The United States in 1930. The year Babyface Nelson robbed his first bank, and Bonnie met Clyde. We got our news on the corner. Our mail came in envelopes. And our crime statistics from a new publication, Uniform Crime Reports for the United States and its Possessions. This booklet provided information on 7 offense classifications. But even though multiple crimes may have been committed, only 1 offense per incident was reported. It was originally produced by the International Association of Chiefs of Police, but was shortly handed over to the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Program, or UCR. For nearly 60 years, the summary reporting system of UCR remained virtually unchanged. However, the volume, diversity, and complexity of crime steadily increased. In 1989, the National Incident-Based Reporting System, or NIBRS, was implemented. NIBRS collects data about victims, offenders, property, and arrests. NIBRS provides for 52 offense classifications with up to 10 offenses per incident. This provides a more comprehensive view of crime in the United States with greater flexibility in the compiling of data. NIBRS isn't just about names and numbers. It gives us a picture of the circumstances and who the victims are. Victims of domestic violence, identity theft, animal cruelty, and reports on cybercrime. Although the FBI has maintained both the summary reporting system and NIBRS for several years, the time has come to make NIBRS the UCR data standard. Therefore, the FBI has declared NIBRS a top priority at the recommendation of the nation's leading law enforcement organizations. The International Association of Chiefs of Police, Major Cities Chiefs Association, National Sheriffs Association, and the Major County Sheriffs Association, along with the CJIS Division Advisory Policy Board, have joined with the FBI to establish the goal of transitioning to a NIBRS-only crime statistics collection system. Many agencies have already seen the benefits of using NIBRS. Here is Colonel Ed Rosler, Chief of Fairfax County Police Department in Virginia.
So we started a journey back in July of 2013 to convert to NIBRS. So what we methodically did over the next few months was to work with all of our elected officials and all our media staff that cover the greater metropolitan area that I work in. We did a side-by-side comparison to help them understand why do some of these categories look different, but also to talk about the benefits of NIBRS, where we could drill down and have deeper discussions about how we could fight crime in our community and use this information.
Because of its value, NIBRS is becoming the data standard not only in large agencies, but also in smaller agencies. Here is Chief Luke Thompson with the Byram Police Department in Mississippi.
Our city was incorporated in 2009, and I was hired in 2010 to create our city's very first police department. We came into a community that didn't have a really well-defined problem. We knew the crime existed. We knew that we needed tools up front that would help us address those problems, help us to clearly define the problem. Came from an agency that was a NIBRS agency and saw how we used crime data there to solve problems and to fight crime in that city. So when we were looking at establishing a brand new police department, NIBRS was kind of on the forefront of our mind. We were able to fund some state-level technology grant monies that allowed us to buy some computer servers and to actually purchase the initial software. And once we got through that initial setup process and we got through that initial certification process, maintaining the NIBRS program has simply become an integral part of what we do.
So this is a much more vast array of crime reporting through the NIBRS system. The ECR was really successful and for its ability to be simple, and it was it used for many years the crime index to represent its summary of crimes. What is the crime index? Well, crime index was a complete simple number that represented a jurisdiction on all of the Part 1 and Part 2 offenses. I'm sorry, Part 1 offenses, both property and violent crimes, and just one nice round number. And so, you know, it was very much something you could use to compare from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. It's from 10 years back or 5 years back, you can know where you stood based upon that simple number. But also you could compare against jurisdictions, time and space. Space meaning from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, you could compare the differences between the two. And so the question is, which crime always had the highest index? Larceny, theft. Well, you know, so, you know, larceny, theft could be just, obviously is the most prevalent crime in a district, but how severe of an impact does that have on the community and on victims is minimum compared to the violent crime, right? So there's definitely a sense of underappreciation of the rates of violent crime. You could have a city with very little or a lot of violent crime, but it was always going to be less than the amount of theft. So, but theft always came out to be just sort of overweighting and underappreciation of violent, overweighting of larceny, theft. So crime the index was actually itself discontinued by the ECR system. And NIBRS was introduced in 1988 to give some complexity to the crimes, like I mentioned, and what was mentioned in the video. So the crime index itself and what the deficiencies of the ECR system. This is something that was not answered. Things that, if you're just giving one summary number, what you're not telling are any nuances. Who committed the crime? What type of person committed the crime? What type of victim was involved with the crime? And when did it happen? Where exactly did it happen? These questions were not addressed in ECR. NIBR system definitely was addressing and is addressing those things. So NIBRS in 1988, the NIBRS, it was driven by details. It's not a summary based, but a detail driven set of numbers. So, for example, if you look at rape, which is a Part 1 offense, the definition of it has changed over time. UCR has transformed its definition over time. It used to be that rape was only something that could happen to a female. For a male, when a male was raped, it was a sexual battery. And so UCR for many years did not report male rape. Just one example of how kind of rigid UCR system was. And so getting into things like date rape, UCR was inadequate as well for many years. And date rape is really one of all four rapes are reported. A lot of those rapes are actually not reported, and a lot of it because it was a date rape. And date rapes are even, especially if you're talking about a marriage, which is, technically date rape is any two people that know each other in some context of relationship, not strangers. And that definitely is something that was kind of, the ball was dropped for many years. And then you have things like Rohypnol, which is Rippies, which is a drug it's called the date rape drug, that's come into being as a player in the facilitation of date rape. You don't even taste it. It can be slipped into your drink at a bar or in a social gathering, and it just makes you completely, in a sense, half awake and half asleep. You sort of are. It's like the memory of a dream. You kind of remember it, kind of don't. So your reporting of it becomes fragmented, and it's already difficult for women to come forward with allegations of rape. So you put a drug in the midst of things, and that makes it even more difficult and more uncertain for them and more scary for them to report. But one good thing about Rohypnol is that it provides an avenue for police to actually investigate. So there's the positive side, that it provides an avenue for investigating the perpetrator, but it's the negative side on the potential for not reporting or just completely not remembering what happened. Crimes against women are something that it's interesting to look at from the statistical point of view. Women are less likely to be victimized than men in all categories of offenses, except for rape. Rape is the only category of offense that they are most likely to be, or less likely to be. I'm sorry. Rape is the only offense that is most likely to be a female as a victim, and that is something that domestic violence is something that has been on the radar for decades now. And the National Violence Against Women Survey was created in order to assess, trying to figure out how much domestic violence, how much rape is happening to women. 18%, nearly 1/5 of women have experienced some sort of attempted or completed rape. 25% of women, 8% of men report having been raped by a significant other, a current or former spouse. So this is pretty very, very telling as far as informative as to what's happening out there that's not being reported potentially. So the Violence Against Women Act, the VAWA, was passed in 1994, and it has to be re-upped every 3 years by Congress. And these kind of statistics have to continue to be, the more accurate we can paint a picture with these kind of statistics, the more we can create policies like the Violence Against Women Act in order to address this serious crime. Yes, so the NIBRS system, more detail, more quality, and more quantity when we talk about reporting crimes. 22 general offenses, 42 specific. They eliminate the hierarchy rule. So what was very, as far as underserving, you could say, of the UCR system, if you had a murder and a robbery in the same crime, which is really something that is robbery are violent crimes themselves, but robbery is less. It's less on the hierarchy underneath murder. Murder is the ultimate crime, so the crime of robbery will be trumped by and won't even be reported. Based upon the hierarchy rule of the UCR. So murder will be reported, but the robbery will not. And then if a robbery happens and a simple assault or an assault happens, it's the robbery that gets reported and not the simple assault. So these sort of, when you have multiple crimes happening at one time, only one gets reported. That's the summary of it. So the NIBRS is something that includes the attempted, the arrested, the completed crimes. It includes the place it happens, the weapon that was used, the type and value of property damaged or stolen. Personal characteristics: was the offender, was there any sort of drugs related? Was there gang affiliation? Was the victim at all in what kind of environment was the victim, as far as where was the victim? Was it 3 a.m. Versus 4 p.m. in the afternoon? Believe it or not, the UCR did not used to report that. So these sort of statistics can tell us when an area might be dangerous and when it's not. It can give us more information. And it also, of course, includes rape of females and males. So other significant features of the NIBRS is that it's done all through the computers, world of computers, which there's a certain sense of economic efficiency, but also environmental cleaner, you could say, greener. But there's also a flexibility, because the NIBRS system allows for new crimes as they evolve in society to be created as they happen. It's very responsive to society. So NIBRS is a definite, when we talk about trying to understand the larger picture, and for society to actually understand what the real problem is in society, as far as what the social crimes we need to be most aware of, and just the reality on the ground. This is getting towards that. So if you have an example, this is the kind of question you might see on exam. In a drug deal gone wrong involving 2 different gangs, a woman was taken hostage and raped. 1 man was shot dead, another stabbed but killed, and a car was stolen. Wow, that's a crazy incident, but not too far-fetched. If you think about what would be the crime that the UCR reported, they would report that 1 was shot dead, and that's it. And then in the NIBRS would you add it up yourself. There'd be 7 or 8 possible crimes there. So NIBRS would report a vast number and give a lot more detail to this one circumstance, that the UCR would just completely collapse into one. So NIBRS is going to do away with the hierarchy rule. It's going to allow for citizens to actually go into the system themselves and see, for example, how many kidnappings possibly have happened at a daycare center, at daycare centers, just to appease. We've talked about in the in today in class, we talked about how fear is induced by a lack of knowledge. So if you have these unfounded fears, the NIBRS system could give you some detail that might put people to rest in their stressors of life. It may help police departments also, and this is really important, is that what it does for police departments, it allows them to build prevention strategies that are much more circumscribed and much more effective. So January 2021 is the launching of the NIBRS. As far as its UCR system is being put to sleep, NIBRS is completely taken over. However, 75% of all law enforcement agencies were committed. So we're not certain how many actually were able to transition. 75% committed, but we don't know how many. That's below 70% below the 90% that we're reporting to the UCR. So that's a concern. We're not going to get a complete picture till everybody gets on board. And the reason that everybody's not on board is because of the fact that it's expensive, and it takes resources to actually implement and become certified through the NIBRS system, as was mentioned by the police chief in the clip I showed. So that is a problem. We're going in the right direction with the NIBRS system, but it's definitely we've got issues with getting everybody on board. So like I mentioned, robbery is I'm going to skip through this, but really most people, just to make note that robbery is a underreported crime through the UCR system, and it is often what we call a hidden crime, hidden event, because of the hierarchy rule. So another issue that we find sometimes is the sure that we often are thought, well, the word that we hear sometimes is a clearance rate. You hear a clearance, crimes are cleared as they are either resolved, or whether or not maybe a suspect dies or is taken into custody in another jurisdiction. It's taken off the books, and for some reason or other, it's taken off the books, so it's cleared. And you see in this set of crimes here, of vehicle theft, burglary, rape, murder, as you see, there's a high rate of people who report motor vehicle theft, but it's very low clearance rate. Everybody wants their insurance, so they're going to report it. Not everybody's going to report burglaries because they just don't think it's a waste of time. There's very little clearance rate. Rape has a clearance rate of about a third, which is pretty high compared to burglary. But the reporting rate is 1 of 4 rapes potentially, so it's a low reporting rate. Clearance rate is because well, it's relatively high because it's often done with a significant other, somebody that you know, so it's able to be traced down. Murder, on the other hand, clearance rate is 61%. So this is a great example of how statistics can be somewhat misleading, and also points to the fact that there's problems with the UCR and NIBRS system and the reporting of it. We know that murder being such a significant factor as far as its impact on consequences for the victim, police officers are going to pour their resources in on those murders, and you want to politically for the public, it's something that you want to address. Police chiefs want to address that violent crime as a priority. Problems with ECR and NIBRS is that not all people will report their victimization. They will completely, because people don't trust the law enforcement. Now, crime just spiked up. Remember this in 2020, and but there's a growing distrust of law enforcement. So therefore, even with the spike in crime that we know happened in 2020, we need to put an asterisk next to that because there's a growing distrust with law enforcement. Therefore, we have probably a growth in unreporting crimes. So this unreported world is something that we are definitely concerned about, and that's why we have the NCVS, which is supposed to attack what we call the unreported dark figure of crime. And this is done every 6 months, twice a year, and it includes, like I mentioned, a lot of the violent crimes and the property crimes, but it does not include murder. That's not even, because that's most likely going to be reported. And that's not something. What we're trying to get at here with the NCVS is the actual crimes that are not going to be reported. And so 2017, about half of all violent crimes and 2/3 of property crimes were not reported to police. So how are you going to account for those figures? It's going to have to go through the NCVS, the survey, which is, like I mentioned, it's government workers going into your home and actually asking you what happened to you this past 6 months. NCVS and UCR, this is kind of breaks down the numbers for both of them. It's as I said, this is combined is what the federal government is trying, the FBI is trying to use to try to get a complete picture. By the way, UCR and NCVS have shown a decline in crime, and since they parallel each other in showing the trends. So they both have shown that the 1990s crime started to go down, and so they always are kind of in parallel to each other, saying the same message, but with different numbers. And so there's problems with NCVS too. There's problems with NCVS. First off, look at the rape. Look how many rapes that the NCVS gathers versus the UCR. That's very significantly, that's 3 times the number of what is reported in the UCR versus NCVS. People are feeling much more comfortable reporting to the NCVS. So there's problems with it. People are definitely who, a government worker's coming into your home. Are you going to be comfortable with them, coming into your home asking you questions? There could be some distrust of that. Some victims are afraid to report even crimes to these folks. And also you're depending only on the memory of and the honesty of just a volunteer survey. So that is something that you got to put a grain of salt on as well, because these crimes have not been followed up to make sure that they actually happened. And the definitions of crimes themselves do not necessarily correspond with the federal and state statutes. So there's some definite issues with the NCDS, but it is what it is, and we take from it and try to learn from it, just like we do with the NIBRS. So yes, that's all I want to say about the NIBRS, UCR, and NCDS system. Should definitely be aware of the difference between the three, and why we moved into the NIBRS, the NIBRS, and moved away from the UCR. So thank you very much, and I hope this was helpful.